We're going to have fun today. Do you guys know who Michael Tracey is? If you don't know who Tracey is, I have some. Michael, I'm going to bring you up. I got some select tweets. No, I don't have some select tweets. You're comfortable and familiar with your tweet history. Michael Tracey.
Sorry, I'm just fixing my out of control, disheveled hair. Everybody criticizes me for not primming myself up enough for these streams. So,
I made sure to take a nice photo of you off the internet because the Lord knows there are a lot of other ones where
no such photo exists. But
the one I got was pretty decent. But it seems that whenever other outlets get a picture of you, it's arguably not
always something grotesque, or I look exceptionally just blinkered and my eyes are bulging, or.
Michael, for those who
I do that, I don't know why. My eyes always just kind of seem to
our faces are what they are. We can only change them so much without ending up looking like Jim Carrey or Madonna. Michael, tell the world who you are for those who don't know.
Who am I? How did I get here? James Stockdale. Ever see that? It was the vice presidential debate in 1992. He was Ross Perot's running mate.
It was allegedly, it went down as one of the worst statements to have ever made, and it ended up sinking his campaign, from what I understand.
I think it's kind of endearing, actually. Well, because he was like a crotchety, he was sort of like, I don't know, a bit of a crotchety old guy. Nobody who would have been perceived as somebody who might be a viable vice president before. He was an Admiral James Stockdale. I don't know. Who am I? Just journalist. That's enough.
Well, and who do you write for? Where do you what might people have known, and where can they find you?
Yeah, primarily my Substack, mtracy.net, but I've written for a variety of many different places across political spectrum. I had a column last week in the Wall Street Journal on an undercovered aspect of the Epstein files saga that I don't think has been covered anywhere before in any major American media outlet. Just having to do with the redaction criteria and like how people are a bit misguided in where they're directing their ire as to the excessive redactions that I agree are plastered on these files and have only perpetuated the suspicion that there's something sinister being covered up. But what they don't understand is that the quote unquote victims and their lawyers have been frantically arguing in federal court for months now that the DOJ ought to be obliged to impose the most sweeping possible redactions on these files, even though they're portrayed in the public arena as the most stalwart champions of, quote, releasing the Epstein files. That was the slogan for a while, right? And yet they were attempting to convince the federal judges in the Southern District of New York that at their behest, the files should not be released, or at least should be radically curtailed in the amount of transparency that they were allowed to provide. So that's just one example. And I've written for, many other places across the political spectrum, done Rumble stuff before with Greenwald on his show back when he was on Rumble. I don't know. Are we on Rumble now, or where are we?
We are on Rumble. We are on Twitter. We are on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, and I will publish this to CommuTube afterwards. I don't do it live.
I think I was on your show with Barnes maybe a couple years ago.
A while back, and then we did a debate, I believe.
Oh yeah, we did this Hero debate. Weren't you the moderator technically?
I was the moderator. I wasn't debating in that one. I had to keep my mouth shut. I think they floated me as a participant only when someone might not have come, and then they found a replacement for the initial.
That was when I was saddled with the somewhat daunting task of having to figure out how I could possibly even attempt to debate Alex Jones, which is not a straightforward thing.
It was fun. Okay, but actually, before we get into the redactions and the substance of this, also, Mike, if you don't want to talk about childhood and stuff growing up, just for a broad idea that I can understand who you are, how old are you?
Yeah. I think you did ask me this question last time I was on, you asked me to give background information, which I'm always a little bit resistant to, maybe irrationally, but I'll do it.
No, so born and raised in America.
You asked how old I am?
Yeah.
How old am I?
I'm going to say 36, but everybody started looking younger the older I got.
37.
Okay, good. And born in America, born and raised in and
New Jersey.
Okay. Now let me ask you the outright question. It was the funny clip, and humor translates badly
on USA. Springsteen, right? So
yes.
A New Jersey icon. So
Michael, when you were on with Piers Morgan and someone asked you who pays you, and you had your headphones go out at the bad time, and
she didn't just ask me who pays me. She asked, "Are you being paid?" She did like a classic McCarthy style phrasing of the question, like, "Are you now, or have you ever been paid by a Jeffrey Epstein co-conspirator?" So she asked me, "Are you being paid by any of Epstein's associates," or something to that effect. So it wasn't just like a general inquiry as to who I'm being paid by. It was a deliberately accusatorily phrased question to provoke the most incendiary reaction.
Well, now that let me bring up one of the more shocking tweets. It was I'll find it where you say there's no broad. Here we go. I think this was one just to segue into this, where you say zero credible evidence for pedophilia, blackmail, rape on Rape Island, large-scale sex trafficking, child sex crimes by prominent individuals, intelligence involvement in Florida case. They will marvel at the mass delusion.
And I could have listed more, but I had limited. I wanted to stay within the standard space restriction.
Well, my question to you is
character restriction.
Just because when she asked you who are you representing or whatever, you have no vested interest, let's say, other than promoting your journalism. And I'm not even saying that in an accusatory way. You write on this.
No, I'm not being paid. I mean, I'm not paid by any AI companies either. Like you, I'm not saying you're contemptible for being paid by an AI company to promote their product, but no, I have nothing even in that vein. It's just people who pay me on Substack through a paid subscription, and I do freelance content. I don't know why I'm constantly under the microscope having to disclose my income every day.
No,
I'm not. But the bottom line is no. Of course, I'm not being paid by any Epstein co-conspirators. And yes, there was a technical problem with my audio feed at the time that she asked me. But if you notice, if you look like in the minute or two leading up to that, I'm like fiddling with my earpiece because it's kind of like, dropping out, and I can hear like every other word, or it's becoming faint, right? No, here, let me and then I eventually do hear what.
Yeah, you hear the second part of what she's saying. I'll play it after.
And that was a mobile studio that the Piers Morgan show sent to my residence, right? So it wasn't like even something that I could have orchestrated myself or what. And I keep telling people, because like even Megyn Kelly brought this up yesterday, like she just did a snide little remark about how it's like implying that I must have faked the audio problem. I'm like, do you really want me to put you in contact with the studio technician who was in the mobile studio van, and that guy can confirm for you on the record?
It was humorous. I mean, the timing was perfect, and it was a perfect storm. And my joke was glib. The only question is, people do ask not who are you being paid, how much you make, etc. Do you have anything that would, if disclosed, result in something of a perception of conflict of interest in terms of why? Okay, that's the mildly. Hold on one second. Dog needs to leave the office. Get out, go. Okay. Dog decided he's not sticking around for today's show. Okay, so with that said, and now you're writing on the Epstein stuff, and so maybe when I say, your Twitter timeline has turned into ostensible defense or minimizing of the Epstein disclosures, and that's
your past week or two, it's been commingled with, wait, what's this giant military cataclysm that just erupted in the Middle East? So I'm trying to like synergize the two topics.
Well, that's it. It's like you talk about what is not.
And I heard your intro, meaning like we're going to do Epstein today and not Iran. That's fine. I just think that there are actually some overlapping issues there, just in terms of public perception, because the internet, I don't know about you, but as far as I can tell, every social media platform at the moment seems convinced, meaning it's a consensus view that it's about Epstein, or Trump launched the war because of Epstein, or he's covering up his own child sex crimes, or he's covering up for other unnamed pedophiles, or, the war is being waged by the Epstein class. That's what even the Iranian government is saying, and that's what domestic opponents in the U.S. and other places in the world are saying. It's the Epstein war, it's the Epstein regime. So that just gives you some insight into the enormity, or this magnitude now of this mass hysteria, I would argue, or moral panic, such that it's now infiltrating people's popular conception of something that on its face should be like wholly unrelated, which is Trump fulfilling his longstanding pledges to radically increase bellicosity with Iran, and now it's being glommed onto Jeffrey Epstein. And I think that's bad, not just because it's false, or that there's like no justifiable basis to make that kind of assertion, but because it's stimulating so many people to develop faulty diagnoses of legitimate political problems or foreign policy issues right now. So it's the Epstein issue has gotten so capacious in terms of how much it dominates like the public consciousness. It's actively distorting millions of people in how they're formulating their views as to this giant military conflict.
I was actually not tempted. I was going to do it, and then I, erred on probably the side of caution not to do it, because these things always get misinterpreted. But I wanted to put a poll out on Twitter in our locals to say, do you believe, or do you feel there's any connection whatsoever between the Epstein disclosures and the debacle and the war in Iran? I think the vast majority of people will say yes. And I don't want anyone thinking I'm asking that question as an accusation.
And it's the same on TikTok. It's the same on Instagram, same on Reddit, same on, most of YouTube that I've seen. Now, I haven't looked at literally everything, obviously, but if you were to attempt to glean like the consensus take right now on those platforms, and you tell me if you've seen any differently, this would be the consensus take, meaning it's an Epstein war, it's a war for Epstein, or was fundamentally triggered by something to do with the Epstein files, etc.
Well, I'm just looking at our locals community where F. Chaton says the war's about Israel. It never needed Epstein. And that, I mean, the things this actually.
Yeah, but people tie in Israel to Epstein. So it's
but as they should.
Same sort of agglomeration.
But as they can't be blamed for doing it when, as we're going to get into, Ehud Barak has strong ties to Epstein. Netanyahu has ties to Epstein. And the thing
lots of people had ties to Epstein. I mean, Epstein had ties to the former Norwegian ambassador to Jordan and Iraq, who was sacked and is now under police investigation, along with her husband, who also had a tie with Epstein. I don't see anybody really spinning out some sort of theory about some sort of Norwegian connection that's supposed to be incredibly damning. Yeah, maybe the Israel connection is more extensive than the Norway connection, but there is a Norway connection. There's a French connection. There's a British connection. There's obviously an American connection.
Well, there's
a Russian connection. There's a Saudi connection. But, so I just have to sort of interject when people kind of foreground this Israel connection and point out that if you're so myopically fixated on the Israel connection at the exclusion of everything else that you might postulate Epstein was connected to, I take that to be a bit bizarre and probably a function of you wanting a propaganda talking point against Israel. Not that I'm pro-Israel substantively, not that I haven't been a huge critic of U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and so forth for as long as I've been in the public arena. But you want that as like a propagandistic talking point to bolster your pre-existing Israel critical views, rather than you trying to come up with a rational understanding of what it is that Jeffrey Epstein did or was or represented.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that in a second. But there's two ways in which
it's literal now war propaganda. I mean, the Iranian, it's like this is the official line of the Iranian government and of like most of the critics of the war effort.
Well, first of all, it doesn't help the way.
And I'm a critic of the war effort. So
no, I say it doesn't help. This is why I've been saying that Bondi should have been fired a long time ago. The bungling doesn't help. We're going to get to the redactions in a second, but history teaches us things if we learn from it. And there were some who argued that the bombing of the aspirin factory by Bill Clinton back when he was under impeachment for the BJ was a distraction. People can say this is an Epstein war, or others can say this is a distraction from the Epstein debacle. Although that makes a little less sense just because Trump was never himself personally tied into this. Maybe some people in his entourage were. The problem is
wasn't tied into what?
Well, implicated in the Epstein, in any allegation.
He was tied in with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, he's tied in with Jeffrey Epstein in a sense of they knew each other. He helped the police and kicked.
No. I mean, so this is going to be a problem, right? Because one thing I find so bizarre about this whole story is that the people who have what I'll kind of generally characterize as a more Epstein maximalist view than I do, and I got a full serving of this when I had to deal with Daryl Cooper a few months ago. I don't know if you know who that guy is.
I know Daryl. The history.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, he full blown. Tucker summons him to do an emergency Epstein podcast last July when the issue got reignited. And this guy is supposedly like one of the leading Epstein researchers in what he calls the Epstein space, which I don't know what the hell that is. I would love to visit this space if it exists somewhere.
No, you don't want to soundbite if you saying I want to visit the Epstein space, Tracey.
Okay, I take it back. But he's supposed to be this preeminent authority on all things Epstein, such that he would be the one guy that Tucker would have, rush over in this emergency situation to inform or educate the audience about Epstein. And he has like every maximalist view on like every little component of it: pedo blackmail ring, intelligence links, everything, blah, 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 blah. But then he just like arbitrarily, he connects every dot, right? He has no problem spuriously connecting every conceivable dot to come up with this master maximalist theory. But then he just does this giant carve out for Donald Trump and just declares that Donald Trump can't be incriminated or implicated in anything because I just really feel that way or believe that. And it just, he happened to be a Trump voter, as were you, if memory serves.
No, I'm Canadian.
So
I
it's
can't
just
vote,
totally, or you supported Trump in 2024.
I still support him through my constructive criticism.
Okay, so there you go. So I think your support for Trump is occluding your ability to depict Trump's role in this story. Now, I don't assert that Trump has incriminated any child sex trafficking crimes or pedophilia or anything, but I'm also not asserting the maximalist view of the Epstein story.
Well, but
if you are asserting the Epstein maximalist story, there's plenty of material that you can use that has to do with Trump. Did you know that one of the 4 government witnesses that was called to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell, Nadia Bjorlin, who was an actress on Days of Our Lives, and there is evidence that she had some degree of involvement with Epstein. It's fuzzy what that consisted of in terms of any kind of sexual offenses, but no, there was involvement. She told the FBI, and she repeated this at the trial, that Jeffrey Epstein took her to meet Donald Trump. You can find message pads of Trump calling up Jeffrey Epstein's house, where all this pedophilia supposedly took place, and leaving messages. You had a testimony. I just saw this in the Epstein files last week. Jeffrey Epstein's personal chef told the FBI that among the prominent people he could recall Epstein ever interacting with, he recalled Trump most prominently, because Trump would come over and dine at the house, and he would.
Hold on. What years?
What year would that have been? It probably would have been early to mid 2000s, early 2000s, probably.
So, Michael, you realize, okay, this is where we can agree on certain things, and we'll try to set aside what we disagree on. Okay, early.
And he goes around calling the whole thing a hoax. I think
the hoax is
my point is, if you're an Epstein maximalist, you can only exclude Donald Trump for some kind of condemnation here if you have a pre-existing political affinity for Donald Trump and you want to support his partisan interests. Otherwise, it just makes zero sense.
No, but I can tell you you're wrong on that for a very good reason. Other than what you can draw from the early 2000s, before the falling out and before the excommunication and before Trump working with the police.
Falling out is another part of this myth. I mean, there's no really good evidence. Yeah, I know people claim now. I want to claim he called the police and reported Epstein. First of all, that was a police detective years after the fact, claiming that Trump called them up. I mean, there's no contemporaneous evidence of that.
Well, so now you're focusing on what is 20 plus years old before the business with Epstein.
But I'm not focused on it to try to say, no, look, Trump's part of the whole web of pedo conspiracy trafficking. But everybody that I ever interact with who takes on a more Epstein maximalist view of this stuff does that with any discrete data point they can ever happen upon with anybody else. Bill Clinton, Bill Gates,
I'll tell you why you're wrong. I'll tell you why you're wrong, because I mean, at least on this. Data points.
Steve Bannon, Trump's consigliere, was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, hold on. Steve Bannon has, I would say, MAGA hasn't turned on him. MAGA has, MAGA. I'm using that word. I hate it. People are rightly critical of that relationship. Even those who appreciate his political insights say,
that Bannon being disavowed, really, facing any penalty.
Oh, first of all, facing any penalty is one thing. Being disavowed, you're not on the same internet I'm on. I mean, he was being lambasted, excommunicated by, I say.
Is he going to be at CPAC and Turning Point USA this year?
We'll find out. But just say a number of the things that you said don't line up. Is that fine? Early 2000s, Trump never denied it. If there were anything, I want to pull up the picture of Bill Clinton getting a back massage here. Where's this one here? I got it. Is this one it? Is this one it? Hold up. Wait a minute. No, that's not it.
I know exactly what photo you're talking about.
Yeah, I want to see it. I want to show. If we're talking
from 2002, yeah, that's Shantae Davies, who was an adult who was photographed giving Bill Clinton a back rub when they were on their trip with Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker and Ghislaine Maxwell.
I just gotta say, if there, and I'm not saying this if
Shantae Davies always said there was nothing ever inappropriate that happened between her and Bill Clinton.
But that's fine. But that's one step closer to a sex victim of Epstein, whether or not she's an adult giving.
What's a sex crime there?
No, there's no. I don't say there's a sex crime here. This is the issue. I don't say there's a sex crime, but don't compare Bill.
I'm not saying either Clinton or Trump are guilty of pedophilic sex crimes. I'm just saying if your presumption in terms of how you're analyzing all this info is that any little data point or snippet of an email or semi-redacted record that you see fluttering across social media is all ipso facto evidence that there must be some kind of sex trafficking conspiracy, and yet you do this giant carve-up for anything that pertains to Donald Trump, That just does not make sense, especially
if
the cover-up people are claiming has been perpetrated is being perpetrated by the Trump administration.
You're calling it a carve-out, and it's not a carve-out because they're not equivalents here. This is an old tweet from Bongino.
So tell me why Bill Clinton is more obviously indicted in things having to do with sex criminality than Donald Trump. Is your best evidence that an adult woman gave him a back rub and said that nothing inappropriate happened?
My best evidence is not just flying on the plane domestically
Trump
between
flew
Miami.
On the plane.
No, hold on. That's what I'm saying. Not just flying on the plane from New York to Miami domestically, but long international trips, multi-days, where there were people of unimpeachable reputational sources on the inside saying there was a bed in the back, young girls on the plane. They didn't like what Clinton was doing right there. I still can't verify.
So if Bill Clinton had only taken, like, I don't know, I forget how many flights Trump took exactly, but there's like a prosecutor, the DOJ, during the first Trump administration, saying, gee whiz, guys, it looks like Donald Trump was on more flights than we had thought. So we're just flagging you because it's like politically sensitive individual who, they're not even saying he did anything wrong necessarily. They're just saying that, they're just flagging it. So if Bill Clinton only had taken a bunch of domestic flights with Jeffrey Epstein, that would be cool.
It would be much less.
That wouldn't have aroused your suspicion?
No, it wouldn't have, because incidentally, it was the same. It was the same. No, with the come on's not an argument. It wouldn't. And Trump's flights on his planes, by and large, the late 90s, which is much different than Clinton going to Africa on humanitarian sources. And you talk about entangling, the Finnish person. Well, how about the Swedish person who's head of,
Virginia Roberts Giuffre having been a spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago?
Well,
who's like the chief accuser in the whole Epstein saga?
Yeah, but and doesn't accuse Trump. I mean, young people work at golf.
That's true. She doesn't.
Resorts, but
neither does Shante Davies. But you just pulled up her giving Bill Clinton a back rub and said, like, this is like, in the ballpark of a potential sex crime, which it's not.
I know. Well, I never said anything of that nature. But what I said is they are material. We are in different leagues when it comes to these circumstantial or at least incriminating.
I don't agree. I mean, Donald Trump clearly, objectively, had a much closer long-term relationship with Jeffrey Epstein than Bill Clinton did. I mean, that's just objectively true. Bill Clinton did go on those long-term trips. In terms of an extensive relationship, what's that?
What are your metrics for this long-term relationship, and when did it end?
Just the longevity of the relationship, the amount of interactions and communications they had, the fact that they were clearly good pals at one point. Again, I'm not saying any of this to say that Donald Trump must therefore be guilty of X, Y, and Z. I'm just saying, as far as I've been able to ascertain, because as you know, I've been extremely immersed in this issue, and I'm not somebody who is just going to arbitrarily say that Trump, is guilty of something. I'm like, I wouldn't make a partisan point about this. This is like, as best I can genuinely relate to you right now, this is my best impartial assessment in terms of the extensiveness of the Clinton versus Trump relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It was just much more extensive with Jeffrey Epstein.
I don't think it's impartial.
There's not a bunch of message pads with saying Bill Clinton that he called the house and they meet up for dinner and stuff, or that they party together at like these modeling functions, or that they're going to the Jeffrey Epstein goes to Marla Maples' wedding and whatever.
I don't think. But first of all, see this.
Did you know that Jeffrey Epstein attended Trump's wedding to Marla Maples?
Yeah, I mean, possibly, but I want to just go back 1 second here. You're not being biased or partisan. You are being unfair because you're comparing things that are not comparable. You're comparing a long-lasting relationship, one of which was cut off at the relevant time, and the other one, which involved international travel with a known child sex trafficker. I mean, do you at least? This is where I wanted to get back to. You concede that Jeffrey Epstein was not true.
I mean, you're saying a known child sex trafficker. There would have been no grounds for anybody to even claim that they knew that during the years that Bill Clinton took the flights with Jeffrey Epstein, which would have been 2002 to 2003. I actually haven't even gotten a chance to listen to the whole Clinton deposition yet that just came out. But my pre-existing knowledge is that the flights to Africa, and then there were, I think, maybe one or two others that were a bit like, Clinton Foundation oriented trips, or, don't hold me to that. But definitely main one, the first one was 2002. And Epstein wasn't even accused of anything like child sex trafficking at that point. There wasn't even a police investigation into him until 2005. So it's this idea that Clinton ought to have known that he was flying on the plane of a child sex trafficker. That's just like a retroactive imputation to Clinton, something that he should have allegedly known that no one could have even had the possible ability to know or even speculate at that point.
Well, I tell you that, again, the material difference is what was alleged to have occurred on the plane from unimpeachable sources that were reported at the time. But let's
2002.
Yeah, well, that was this is
what was alleged to have occurred by an unimpeachable source on the plane in 2002.
This one right here. I think this is the Fox News has told multiple U.S. Secret Service agents to former President Trump have been subpoenaed or expected to testify, yada, yada. Now, is this the right tweet that I want to bring up? Oh, yeah, who have had a lot of offers about some plane rides and some of his computer usage. They should start looking at what happened to BlackBerries. Okay, that's not the right tweet. This was this back in the day, Bongino episode, unimpeachable source said on the flights, there were young
You consider
girls
Dan Bongino an unimpeachable source?
No, he was referring to his unimpeachable source within the FBI.
Oh, so an unimpeachable, a highly impeachable source, Dan Bongino, is referring to some allegedly unimpeachable source that anonymously told him something?
Well,
that's your source?
No, well, unfortunately, I can't say that Dan has done some favors to himself.
But and that's the best source you got?
Retroactive analysis. There were no, but you see, it doesn't, because he might have.
How much BS did Dan Bongino spew on this thing for years?
That is now a legitimate question that people are going to ask.
And Cash Patel.
And Cash Patel. That is the legitimate question that people are going to ask, because there has never been a reckoning or an addressing of if what he said over the last 5 years was wrong.
They had a Rumble reunion a few weeks ago, and they just casually banter about totally unrelated. Of course, neither of them utter the word Epstein.
Let me ask you, let's try to agree on what we can agree on. Epstein was a human sex trafficker. I'm not even going to go with the pedophile yet, but he was a sex trafficker, if only to himself. We can agree on that.
No, I mean, I don't buy the whole basis of what people now claim to be, quote, sex trafficking. It's the most nebulous, amorphous, infinitely elastic concept that I've ever had the misfortune of having to study in any great detail. Go look at this New York Times article from 2 weeks ago or so. They described something that I've been saying for quite a while now, including in a very lengthy article that I did for Compact magazine back in October, which is that prosecutors are increasingly using charges related to sex trafficking, or they're charging defendants with sex trafficking offenses using the relevant federal statutes that are so far afield from what would have been contemplated as, quote, sex trafficking as little as 10, 15, definitely 20 years ago. Nobody would have even cognized this stuff as constituting some form of sex trafficking. So no, I don't know what that means anymore. Well, there's a case. There's a. I'll just give you one quick example.
Yeah, for sure.
In Massachusetts, right, there was a Superior Court case. I think that was the court. It was like where these guys appealed their convictions for sex trafficking up the chain in Massachusetts because they had been charged with sex trafficking by the local police, local prosecutor, the state prosecutors in Massachusetts, for having responded to a police decoys ad on some app or website advertising sexual services with an escort, essentially, and saying, if you want to have, if you want X, Y, or Z sexual activity, call or text this number. The guys do it. They're told to show up at a hotel room. And then when they show up, the police bust them. That got charged as sex trafficking. Now that the court in Massachusetts threw that one out, but I'll give you one other quick example.
No, because
Harvey Weinstein, okay?
Yep.
A federal judge found that Harvey Weinstein could be sued for violating the federal sex trafficking statute because he was at the Cannes Film Festival one year and a woman came to his hotel room and alleged something untoward happened in the hotel room sexually. And because Harvey Weinstein allegedly offered or suggested to this woman that he could help her get a movie role, that was a thing of value that he offered, and therefore it qualified as sex trafficking per federal statute. So, I mean, nothing about this whole concept even makes sense anymore. It's so infinitely elastic. When you ask me, do I agree that Epstein was a sex trafficker? No, I don't, because nobody can define that. If you're now defining it as adult women 15 or 20 years after the fact, claiming that they're sex trafficking victims, and oh, by the way, coinciding with that, there are multi-million-dollar settlement monies suddenly available to them, where they are going to get the highest possible settlement if they can embellish or dramatize their claims and say that they're a sex trafficking victim, even if contemporaneously they might have regarded whatever they were doing as either consensual or unremarkable, but now suddenly they were enslaved in some giant sex trafficking operation. I mean, this whole concept was introduced, trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, as a form of enslavement. It's modern day slavery. I mean, that's what, like, when presidents make a statement for Human Trafficking Awareness Month, as Trump actually did in January, funnily enough, they say this is, human trafficking or sex trafficking. It's a modern slavery. So no, you're not enslaved if you're an adult woman in your 20s and you go to some island or you go wherever for a luxury vacation, and like maybe you hook up or you do something, and then 15 or 20 years later, JP Morgan is dangling, a couple $1 million over your head, and to get it, you can say that you're a sex trafficking victim. That's not enslavement. And so I don't know what people even mean by trafficking anymore, because it is so unmoored to any kind of stable definition.
Well, here's the problem, is that you make a decent point on one element of it, and it's the same argument we had when it came to Andrew Tate, where you're talking about the sex industry, and then if it's synonymous with sex trafficking, then you can have these abuses of the law. That being said, because it's been abused in,
but Epstein wasn't involved in a commercial sex industry.
Well, but what I mean to say is the sex trafficking that they were trying to go after Tate for, set aside all of his other immoral behavior and whatever it was. People were arguing this is a massive abuse of the sex trafficking laws, which might be opaque in the first place,
which is constant now.
Well, it's constant now, and because it's been abused now, doesn't mean it's been abused.
I mean, look at Diddy. Maureen Comey, who was the prosecutor who was in charge of prosecuting Epstein until he then dies, right? And then she also then she's one of the lead prosecutors of Ghislaine Maxwell. She prosecuted Diddy, as you might recall.
Oh, recently. No, I remember.
And she tried to claim that he was a sex trafficker in a sex trafficking conspiracy of one, I guess. I haven't done a full in-depth study of that case. Maybe I should. But my understanding, based on what I have looked at, is that what was alleged was that Diddy was a sex trafficking conspirator in a sex trafficking conspiracy that consisted of one person himself. Now, I'm sorry, we've gotten to a point where this concept can't be freely invoked anymore. Like, you can't just ask me cavalierly, do you agree that Epstein was a sex trafficker, if like the contours of what supposedly constitutes sex trafficking now are so radically expansive that you or I could be a sex trafficker if we wink at if you wink at a lady out your window and then you facilitate her movement somehow by saying, hey, go down the street. I mean, it's never ending.
Let me just say, there is no realm of the universe where I could even be accused for that. You keep your schmeckle in your pants and your eyes to yourself. But set that aside. Maureen Comey, another bad example, because my argument has always been that the prosecution of P. Diddy for sex trafficking of one person was the cover-up and not the prosecution. Bring it back, however, to Epstein. He pleaded guilty to solicitation of a prostitution from a minor. Maxwell was found guilty of, and we can go through it. I mean, whether or not you think the conviction is worth anything, politicized, whatever, from up to 90.
I think I maintain she was wrongfully convicted. That trial was fatally flawed and actually farcical. I've never examined a more farcical trial of any kind.
At least let's just get to the facts from 94, from at least
those are allegations.
Correct. Well, now they're proven because she was convicted.
Yeah, she was convicted, but
Jeffrey Epstein, they abused minor girls by, among other things, helping Epstein to recruit, groom, and ultimately abuse victims known to Maxwell and Epstein to be under the age of 18. So at least one important premise of your caveat, they were under 18. Now, I know you took shit, and I think rightly so, for suggesting it's not pedophilia if they're over 16, because pedophilia is an attraction to a prepubescent minor, and these are fully developed.
That's always been the definition. If you look at any medical journal, the Medical Association, I mean, I know it's I always say, look, I didn't wake up one morning and say to myself, gee, you know what would be fun? Constantly having to debate the definition of pedophilia on the internet. No, it just happens to be a relevant factor here, unfortunately, and it constantly gets brought up to me, or I'm constantly demanded to address it. So I don't understand what is so radical about simply pointing to how pedophilia has always been defined as a medical pathology, which is, yes, sexual, deviant or pathological sexual attraction or sexual activity with prepubescent children. That's just what it always has been since the term was coined. But now we have even more concept creep, just like trafficking, where I don't know, soon enough it seems like you're going to be called a pedophile if a 25-year-old makes a claim about you 20 years after the fact. Because people insist that pedophilia is a proper way to describe some sort of, yes, maybe statutorily illegal, but nonetheless consensual sexual encounter, or inadvisable or immoral encounter with somebody who's 17 and a half. Is that pedophilia? Because if you say it is, then if that's just accepted, that's what foments the mass hysteria and moral panic. And I'm trying to rein that back in, because I argue it has really detrimental consequences in a variety of different areas. And one of the main engines of it is this constant repetition that we're in the midst of this giant international pedophilia crisis of such monumental proportions. And that's just not accurate according to any reasonable understanding of the facts as I see it.
I would suggest it's a losing battle to try to, from a perversion and systemic abuse of young people perspective, it's a losing battle to try to distinguish between pedophilia, statutory rape, abuse of minors. I mean, because
why is it a losing battle to distinguish between things and using facts and evidence? Like,
no,
I consider myself a journalist. Isn't that what journalists are supposed to do?
No, well, you're I say conveniently, but from your own perspective, using the term pedophilia in a clinical term, and then people are using it in a colloquial term, and so in
right.
two different.
And I would say that the colloquial usage of the term now has gotten absurd. Like, do you think that that's a, like, just from your personal perspective, whether or not it's a losing battle, do you think it's reasonable to say that something sexually improper allegedly happening with a 17-year-old could be construed as pedophilia?
No, I wouldn't say it's unreasonable to suggest.
Okay, so then we agree.
No. I would say it's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable for people to call it pedophilia, because you're going to rely on a statutory provision where then I can say, okay, well, I'll go to Nigeria, or I think Philippines has a age of consent of 11. Well, it's not pedophilia.
Wait, so you're saying it is reasonable for people to characterize some sort of sexual activity with a 17-year-old as pedophilia?
Well, I say with a minor.
So it can be characterized just as you would characterize illicit sexual activity with a 4-year-old?
Well, let's back it up.
Because that would be pedophilia.
From a clinical psychiatric perspective, correct. From a colloquial legal perspective, if you take a 17-and-a-half-year-old, take 17,
no, not from a legal 18. Pedophilia is not in the statute book.
No, but hold on. But take you want to take the edges and then try to draw something from that, like 18 less a day. Are you comfortable calling the person a pedophile? I don't know, but it was kind of perverted when people were doing the countdown for some of these 17-year-old TikTokers to turn 18. 14 years old, I would have no moral objection. You could say that
Trump has made pedophilic remarks in his past, because he would go on Howard Stern and joke that, like, some girl, I can't give you the exact quotes, but they're quotes.
I wouldn't quite. First of all, someone
he
running
makes
a pageant,
sexually charged or sexual innuendo, quips having to do with, like, some girl being attractive and, like, maybe when she's older, etc. Like, I wouldn't call that pedophilia. Maybe you could say it's crass or something, but really, pedophilia. I agree. Pedophilia is like the worst thing you could call anybody. Like, the pedophile is the worst thing you could ever call anyone. So shouldn't we be a little bit scrupulous in how we use the term?
You're also now confounding speech versus actions, which are two different things. So making crass jokes under a Howard Stern type environment, I don't think anyone would call that pedophilia. So words versus actions, and pedophilia requires actions. Nobody's it's like being a.
Well, pedophilia does not require actions. Actually, pedophilia is having the pathological sexual attraction. So you could be a pet, somebody who has the pedophilic sexual attraction, but does not actually take any action with children to actualize.
But then you're not. Then I don't know that you'd be called a pedophile. I wonder if pedophile requires the act.
So if somebody came up to you and says, like, "I have a confession for you, Viva. I'm sexually attracted to 5-year-olds," you would not then consider them a pedophile?
Oh, I would consider them to be a pedophile. Yes, but now
done anything sexually with a 5-year-old.
No. Well, then one would be a criminal pedo. The other one would be a pedophile. A criminal pedophile.
They're both pedophiles
in weight. Yeah, and I think
there you go. So it's not contingent on the action; it's contingent on the attraction.
No, correct on that particular point. Now, calling someone a pedo versus as a result of their actions. The question here is Epstein doing things with 16-year-old, which I think we can concede.
Again, can I just clarify something? I'm not saying. I just want the audience to know, because unfortunately this qualifier is necessary. Nothing I'm saying here is the product of some hidden agenda that I have to try to normalize my own depraved sexual urges. Are you reading the chat? Honestly, I don't have any sexual. I mean, look, I'm not. If you think I was a secret pedophile, right? Would this be the issue that I would want to spend day in and day out discussing? Like, wouldn't that bring some unwanted attention to me? Like, wouldn't I be found out because, like, I get called a pedo like a million times a day? I mean, you should see my DMs and so forth. So no, that is not the secret agenda.
I know everyone's like, the joke is, I want you to check this guy's hard drive, referring to you.
Yeah, that's what that's all I hear.
And that's right. So
fine, I tell people, you want to come check it? I mean, there's not going to be anything that interesting, but like, if you want to make an appointment to come over to my apartment and check my hard drive,
well, this is not.
I guess. I mean, go ahead. You're going to see a lot of PDF, not PDF files, but like actual PDF documents with like court records and things, and like Ukraine war videos and stuff like that. It's not going to be.
Get ready for people to that clip. If you want to come to my apartment,
I posted that on X.
Okay, but so back it up now. So I think your comparison between Clinton and Trump, I think, is wrong, but at least I understand it. Your distinction of pedophilia is, I think, a distinction without a difference when it comes to this discussion, because we're talking about sexual depravity. And then the question is going to be, well, you say You say if they're 16 to 18, well, that is a legally distinct window than 18 and above. But you're saying 18 and above, you don't get to claim human sex trafficking, as though people can't be, I don't know, coerced into some form of blackmail, extorted type sexual activity. 16 to 18,
you got to give me evidence of the coercion and the extortion.
Well, I mean,
there's no such evidence available that I've been able.
Well, because you're disregarding the actual testimony.
And the pedophilia thing is not a distinction without a difference. I'm sorry. When people hear the word Epstein, if we were to poll the American people right now, right, or even like the world, because this is like an international, scandal now that's causing political tumult in Britain and Norway and Sweden and Slovakia and everywhere, France. We were to poll like every country in which there's been an Epstein controversy of some sort, and we're to do like a word association thing. What's the number one word that you make the association to when you hear the word Epstein?
Well,
you listen to a bunch of words. Don't you think it would be pedophilia or pedophile?
Pedophile sex ring is what I would.
So then it's not a distinction without a difference. If the basis for why people are making that word association is incredibly flawed to the point of, I would argue, being nearly fictitious.
Now I don't think it's incredibly flawed. I think some of the victims who were 14 at the time, 14, 15, you're going to say, well, that's still not pedophilia, as if you're going to get the kids to either.
How about this example? So when Pam Bondi gave her, a car crash testimony before the House Judiciary Committee a few weeks ago, which was a shit show hearing based on her behavior, but then also the behavior of the Democrats and the behavior of Massey. I mean, I've never seen somebody who I actually held in somewhat high regard, meaning Thomas Massey, because he seemed intelligent. He seemed attuned to like legislative minutia. He could tell you what was going on in the Rules Committee when like the majority of actual members of Congress have no idea what goes on in the Rules Committee. I've never seen somebody so thoroughly beclown themselves in the span of like less than a year than Thomas Massey. It's incredible. But anyway, so when Pam Bondi was protested, right, by those supposed Epstein survivors, they were all, if not all of them, maybe all but one of them were adults at the time that they claimed they were victimized by Jeffrey Epstein. And yet, when people are seeing this imagery and the footage of them being protested, they're getting the immediate impression that's just fed to them constantly from all this hyper-credulous media coverage, whether it's on the online podcast media like we're on now or the mainstream CNN type media. None of them think, everybody agrees with you that it's a distinction without a difference. So nobody cares to make the distinction or to clarify to viewers that this is you shouldn't make the word association to pedophile for these alleged Epstein survivors, because they're not alleging anything that comes close to pedophilia. They're claiming that they were adults in their 20s. Something potentially happened, and some of it might be recovered memories. Some of it was like adult models going to an island, and then 20 years later realizing there's a JP Morgan settlement available. So yeah, it's not a distinction without a difference, because this is exactly what is fueling the moral panic and mass hysteria. The idea that there's this unpunished pedophilia scandal.
I'll disagree with you on one thing. I will agree with you on a part of something that if I were Massey and Ro Khanna, and I've said this before, their I say righteous movement to have the Epstein files disclosed got hijacked by partisans like Gloria Allred's what's her name, Lisa Bloom, and the like. And undoubtedly you have people jumping on a bandwagon. That doesn't undermine certain things. When I say people are associating with pedophilia, let me just bring up a few things. I'm curious to know what your explanation
I think you don't think they undermine themselves when they defamed a bunch of random nobodies, meaning a bunch of men who had no profile or public notoriety whatsoever as child sex criminals on the basis of literally nothing. Like Ro Khanna went on the floor of the House of Representatives and listed these names as though he was listing perpetrators of child sex crimes. And then Thomas Massey said that they were incriminated in child sex crimes. And Thomas it was just totally made up. I mean, they just slandered these random men who are not
two things on that.
Totally innocent men. They didn't undermine themselves in that case.
I'll say two things on that. Set Ro Khanna's side. Thomas Massey specifically said they might just be people who were in a random lineup.
He said that they were incriminated. Likely incriminated. I'll give you the quote.
Well, but likely incriminated is not incriminated, and it is.
Oh, so if I just say, hey, Viva, I mean, it's possible that Viva is likely incriminated in child sex crimes. Like you would say, okay, no big deal.
Well, if it's based on me having been in the lineup, and then the context.
No, it was based on a total a totally false reading
Well,
of that
no,
file.
it wasn't based on a false reading, and I would argue that there are some redactions that were done and some that were
False
not done.
interpretation of what that file signified.
Well, no, because he specifically added in advance the qualifier. They might have just been random people in a lineup.
So
and
you're
then
fine with politicians going around accusing random citizens of having been complicit in child sex criminality?
No,
I'm not fine with
that's not what happened here. But set that aside.
Yes, it is.
I do think that some of these redactions were specifically done so that people would make those types of mistakes, so they could then be subsequently discredited.
And what makes you think that? Why would the Trump administration have?
Well, why would those names have been redacted?
Well, I mean, Occam's razor, to use a little bit of a cliche in terms of logical argumentation.
They were redacting victims and co-conspirators. Why would they have redacted those names?
Occam's razor tells me, because I've looked into this a great deal. I've spoken to people, like I've done original reporting to some degree in addition to the primary source materials. Occam's razor tells me this was like a mammoth undertaking that the DOJ had to get done on an expedited schedule. We're talking about millions upon millions of files. The redaction process is already incredibly laborious. They had to take 500 lawyers from the DOJ, including some from like the National Security Division, and put them on this Epstein redaction beat for like 6 weeks or something, or longer. And there was not like a streamlined process for the redactions. So some of it's
your answer is incompetence, which I will agree.
I would say, or just something a little bit more banal than the idea that there was some intentionality for specifically redacting that document to like trick people. Like I don't think that's credible. No,
I said that could be it's one thing. It's either incompetence or it's malice. And then when you go back to some of the
what's your case for why there would have been like why would the Trump administration have done that with malice?
Well,
since you supported Trump, I mean, what
the Trump administration? I have been long now critical of Pam Bondi because of this, and I think.
Well, you supported Donald Trump. He's ultimately the buck stops to him, right?
To some extent, when you're operating the largest corporation on earth and you have to rely on moving parts, he's made mistakes. It's not like saying you support Trump doesn't mean you support his decision to pick Bill Barr or rely on Anthony Fauci. It means that you.
I'm just saying the buck stops at him. That's the famous Harry Truman statement.
No, it's true, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily
just like it stopped at Joe Biden. I'm sure you didn't have. I'm sure you weren't overly hesitant to point out that the buck stopped at Joe Biden when something went wrong in the Biden administration.
No, right? I don't think Biden was in charge whatsoever. So it stopped with him insofar
whether he was or he wasn't. The buck stopped at him if he didn't have the cognitive capacity to oversee the executive branch.
Diversions for a second. I'll tell you, the buck stops with the president. Yes. Why would they do it nefariously to discredit Thomas?
I mean, he signed the bill.
No, he signed the bill, but he didn't, have a hand in the redactions. Why would they do it to discredit Thomas Massie? There's an easy argument as to why they would have done it out of malice. Pam Bondi in particular, because there's been a war waged against Thomas Massie.
But I can assure you that Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna are more than capable of discrediting themselves on this issue because they're
possibly. But we're talking about one.
I spoke to them both, about the Epstein files issue, and they were amazingly lacking in knowledge about just basic tenets of the whole story as of like last summer and fall. They just spout off about stuff and make false claims.
Stick to one thing at a time. The naming of the names, Massie specifically said they might have just been people in a random lineup. If they were, there's no reason why their names.
Because Todd Blanche was the one who's basically in charge of this, right? The deputy attorney general.
And
that was Trump's Trump installed Todd Blanche because Blanche was Trump's former personal attorney. He represented Trump as his defense counsel in the Stormy Daniels, quote unquote hush money trial. So Todd Blanche is the one who put in redactions to trick Thomas Massie and discredit him.
Todd Blanche is the one who issued that memo that utterly emasculated and humiliated Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. And I don't think that Todd Blanche, because he was appointed and he was
from last July.
Sorry, yeah, the unsigned
memo.
Do
we know that Todd Blanche is the one who composed that memo? I'm actually not even aware of that.
Yeah.
It could be.
Whether or not he composed it, he's the one that tweeted it out. Is my recollection, because I remember writing.
It got leaked to Axios.
Well, it got leaked to Axios. Who the heck leaked it?
I don't know. Like maybe Todd Blanche leaked it, but I don't know that he did.
Hold on. Hold on. I'll pull up my tweet from the time. But bottom line, I have no more trust for Todd Blanche than I do for Pam Bondi. I think the DOJ.
You have no trust for Trump's personal attorney, who he expressly installed because of his loyalty to Trump.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not gonna. Okay. I have no. Trump
has got a lot of problems. Then I mean, maybe he supported the wrong guy in 2024.
He's had a history of making some bad picks and some good picks, and some people do get hijacked in the process. But set all that aside,
he himself is never a bad pick. Like the guy who's constantly making all these bad picks. The problem never lies with him, right? It's always with him being bamboozled.
certain problems lie with him, and that's why you try to get him to make the right decision in the long run, and hope that he doesn't get.
How about his decision making right now in the international arena, like the Middle East?
I'm look. You have to. I've issued my constructive criticism in a way that I think is, it'll either get listened to.
Okay, well, I'll issue my constructive criticism right now as well. This is batshit crazy. I mean, seriously.
But hold on. I want to get to Iran, but I
the Iran war. I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to just bring up a few of these. Hold up, because when you say the pedophile, doesn't just
from my perspective, I think Todd Blanche is actually pretty rational. If it was him who was the public face of the DOJ day in and day out, rather than Bondi, things would have gone a lot more smoothly because at least he's competent. Pam Bondi's like just a bimbo.
I wouldn't use that term in particular.
Why not? Because it's too accurate.
I have used skank, but not for Pam Bondi. But skank
it's too true. You can't handle the truth.
Okay, but hold on. You say the pedophile. I don't.
Okay, she's a nincompoop.
She's an nincompoop. I can go with that. When you said that there's zero evidence in the files anywhere for pedophile, sex trafficking, whatever, I've been dying to know what you understand by emails like this, where it says, "Who all is in the Austin office today going to want pizza?"
Oh, come on.
No. I'm not on board.
Hold on, I got to stop you here because look, we have millions of Epstein files now, even before this round of record releases. So there was the first round in December, December 19th, second round, January 30th. Even before December 19th, we had just a mind-boggling quantity of Epstein files that you could spend the rest of your life trying to pour through. And believe me, I've tried, and you still wouldn't be able to finish. An avalanche of lawsuits and litigation, criminal cases with like accompanying exhibits, appeals, journalistic inquiries. We got interviews, you could literally spend the rest of your life pouring through this stuff. And then, so your best evidence for me, given this enormous quantity of material, is that people decided on January 30th that the research method, right, was not going to actually like go through and read as I have done. I thought, okay, I want to see if there's a particular prosecution memo where the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York talk about whether they're going to charge this that person. No, it's like but guys who went in and typed in pizza and grape soda and beef jerky. That's your research method. And then when stuff pops up, that's your best evidence of child sex trafficking. You wouldn't expect to have a little bit firmer evidence at this point than some weird sounding email from 2012 that references pizza.
Well, first of all, no, but now I can understand I don't want to accuse you of playing games, but I can now understand what you're doing. The United States Virgin Island lawsuit, which I'm going to try to bring it up in the backdrop. I don't know if I need it. The United States Virgin Island lawsuit.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Yeah, that was never substantiated.
But so now you're saying okay, well, you don't even have a memo or a lawsuit because that was never substantiated because it didn't go to court. So you literally have framed it that there will never be.
That U.S. Virgin Islands memo has 1 million incendiary claims that are sourced to random bogus news, quasi news articles. That was the U.S. Virgin Islands trying to get the most possible money from the Epstein estate, right? So of course they throw in everything that they possibly can. That's the most inflammatory.
It wasn't a memo. It was a civil suit.
It was the complaint
that resulted in a massive settlement. And so now, but appreciate what you're saying then.
Yeah, after Epstein was dead, right? So they're suing a dead guy's estate.
It was. They made allegations.
And the guy wasn't alive to defend any of the claims.
They made allegations of a sex trafficking operation of the Epstein enterprise.
Lots of people make lots of claims.
Okay, and so you say it was never proven in court. But even when it gets proven in
financial incentive,
stop.
Let me just ask you in general: do you think it's worth taking into account when there's an enormous financial incentive for somebody to do anything?
You take into everything,
and how that might influence their behavior.
Michael. So now, even a conviction with Ghislaine Maxwell is not enough to convince you because you disregard that it was a political trial.
Yeah, I'll give you a whole. We could spend 3 hours on that.
A civil lawsuit from the U.S. Virgin Islands doesn't prove anything too because it didn't get proven in court.
Because a complaint unto itself doesn't prove anything. You know this.
But neither does a conviction to you. So you're never going to get proven wrong.
Well, because I'm going through. I could go through every element of why I find that that trial to have been farcical and why the evidence was inferior.
It's called motivated reasoning. You disregard conviction. You disregard lawsuits.
Okay, everybody has motivated
emails talking about slicing pizzas. So nothing's
hold on. So if the U.S. Virgin Islands in that lawsuit, I can't recite it off the top of my head, but basically they say a 12-year-old was seen on the island, and the source of that claim was some random, I think it was some tabloid news article essentially, where they claim that somebody who was working at on the airport lookout post looked in the distance and thought they might have seen, and this is them saying so in hindsight, years after the fact, They think they might have seen a female who might have been, that young in the distance going to the island. You don't think there would be any additional evidence that might be able to corroborate that at this point? Because there isn't.
No, well, of course there isn't, because it was never.
That's why I say no credible evidence. I don't regard that to be credible evidence at all. It's like quadruple bogus.
You don't consider a conviction to be credible evidence. Let me ask you this.
Credible evidence that Maxwell was convicted.
So this is another one that I want to. I'm just curious as to what you think of. I forget exactly who Marsha Drakov. So you have an email from. I think this was to Jeffrey Epstein originally. It says, Katya has a law firm, corporate law. She also understands blockchain regulations, ecosystem as well. Al Jazeera, Alessia is a film director. She's working on human rights VR movie. Alexandra is an actress and an art expert. Her business ideas, all of them are smart, high energy, and great. And then he says, your friend Alessa told me about the project she is doing, researching a really bad guy that gets children for sex sent to his island. She almost fainted when I told her that person is me. That's from Jeffrey Epstein. Like,
yes, I don't know about you. But like if every private text message and email and DM of mine from the past 20 years was dumped into the public domain, people would be able to find messages or emails that in context at the time would have been understood by the recipient of my message as sarcastic or a joke or an inside joke. Like sometimes you have inside jokes with people where you make little snide references to things, right? I mean, this is not crazy. I mean, you probably are familiar with this concept. I would imagine that you have done the same at some point in your life. And so, yeah, clearly that's Epstein. I mean, Epstein was chronically sarcastic or sardonic. And if you want to, if your argument to me right now is that email is Jeffrey Epstein confessing in an email to having orchestrated a child sex trafficking conspiracy that he knew he might be able to, he was possibly going to be prosecuted for, because that was around that time, that's December 8, 2018, right? That was right around the same time where this Miami Herald series comes out, and Bradley Edwards, his like legal nemesis, is colluding with the Southern District of New York. Like he knew that he was potentially in like some legal liability at this point, but he's going to make a confession.
So let me flip that entire premise on its head. We're talking about a man now who has pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor, who is the butt of an international, call it a badly hidden secret if you don't believe, if you do believe it, or a trope if you don't believe it. And he's going to make that joke. I mean, that argument cuts
okay,
both
but so
ways.
like let's say this is not a joke. That was him being totally serious, even though we have like millions of emails.
It's like
when he's clearly where he's clearly being sarcastic or joking or tongue in cheek or what have you. But let's just stipulate that's serious. Okay, then like where is the underlying actual hard tangible evidence that would show that he did have children sent to his island for sex? Because there's none available or none on offer. And so what now? Your contention would be that Donald Trump and Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi are still covering it all up,
or that doesn't exist to be covered up in the first place, which is where we talk about where Epstein, a trove of evidence. I think this is the article, disappeared from Epstein's place when he was raided, and in the week in advance of it. And
given that there's like nearly, I would say like at least 700, something like well over $500 million. I say it's approaching $1 billion in terms of like various forms of settlement monies that are available around the whole Epstein thing, depending on like how you count it out all up. We wouldn't have had an instance of somebody filing a lawsuit where they allege that they were sex trafficked as a child to the island. Now, I know that Virgin Islands thing where they're just kind of like rehashing that like bizarre little half an anecdote from somebody who like saw something from a distance years before. But in terms of somebody who could get financial remuneration for having been heinously sex trafficked as a child to what we're told is pedophile island or rape island, like that wouldn't have manifested anywhere, really? Because like everybody who ever claims.
But first of all, I mean, I think on the one hand, to some extent, it has, and then you disregard it as being people who have fabricated stories for the purposes of jumping on a settlement or claim. You're saying if they were adults and not necessarily.
You're saying that one throwaway line in the U.S. Virgin Islands lawsuit is sufficient?
Well, no, I think the entire lawsuit details it in.
There was like one half a sentence on that.
No. Well, I can bring it up. We can assessment of that. We can go read it. It's a lengthy lawsuit that goes into the sex trafficking.
No, but I'm saying in terms of the claim that there was like somebody who was like 13, or maybe it was 12 or 13, or something like that, who was spotted allegedly at the airport going into the island.
No, I'll reread it, but no, it was more extensive than that, and it was. But
then there was a larger sex trafficking. But it
won't make a difference. So, Michael, you've already said it won't make a difference regardless. If there is a lawsuit, it'll be unproven allegations. If it gets settled, it's because the estate settled it. You can. And by the way, this all goes back to 2000.
Why am I crazy for requesting some measure of actual hard evidence for anything? And then none never gets presented. And then you have to resort to pulling up emails that reference pizza.
No, but first of all, it's wrong on several fronts. There was hard evidence. You just say that trial with Maxwell was fake.
I'm saying for the 12-year-old child sex trafficking on the island, for the child sex trafficking on the island, which was in that email you pulled up, where Epstein is clearly making a joke. But I said, even for the sake of argument, let's say it wasn't a joke. Shouldn't we expect that to be accompanied at some point by some tangible evidence showing that children were sex trafficked to the island?
Well, there's two issues to that, because
that wasn't a component of the Maxwell trial.
No, well, and I have other theories as to why they had a very limited scope of the sex trafficking even in the Maxwell trial, and you'll say
it wasn't limited at all. It was as expansive as they could possibly conjure it, because they were desperate to get her convicted of something.
Two questions to that. It says why there is no better evidence, and then one argument is going to be there was a lot of evidence that got moved before Epstein got arrested, and then the flip side is in 2008 they didn't invest from his offices or from his home in Manhattan, which is might be where it was kept in any event. But and then 2008. Sure, I am fairly certain there's well documented disappearance of computers.
Yeah, one of his lawyers came in. They went to access a safe. They removed some materials, and they came back and then returned the materials. And the FBI says that they went and they cataloged everything that was in the safe when they first raided it. Right.
It is funny when we decide what we want to believe and what we decide.
No, I'm not saying I believe it or disbelieve it. I'm saying here's what the FBI said. Then you can make what you will. What the FBI said. Because an FBI agent who did the raid testified at the Maxwell trial. Okay, they cataloged everything that was in the safe. Then stuff was removed, and then the stuff got returned. If I'm saying this, if I'm recollecting correctly, I mean, I might be. I think you're wrong. But they said that nothing was removed from compared to when they first cataloged it. So now you would have to say that Donald Trump's FBI, because they're the ones who raided it, they were covering for Jeffrey Epstein. So maybe you shouldn't do that carve out for Trump, because it seems to go pretty high up the chain of command, or it seems to run pretty deep in terms of where Trump's in charge, that all this malfeasance is taking place that you seem to want to impute.
Well, no, the malfeasance occurred well before Trump's first term in any event. And if you want to argue,
but the raid of the townhouse in New York was in July of 2019.
Correct, but correct. And the question is, what was taken beforehand?
So if you're saying the FBI tampered with it, or the FBI was
I never said that. I said the FBI.
Well, if you're saying that there was some kind of something that was suspicious that went on in terms of the FBI,
I believe it's well known that items were removed beforehand, as whether or not he got tipped off for the raid.
Items were removed from the Palm Beach house in October of 2005 during the earlier phase, through the state level initial phases of that process.
Well, that was the one where I was getting to now, which is in terms of why you might not find any hard evidence, is because in 2008 or 2006 they never actually did any investigation, and then it's a question of whether or not
that's not true at all. They never did any investigation.
In terms of a broader sex trafficking operation, where they gave the
because they had no basis they had no evidence that would suggest that.
Then why would they give non-prosecution agreements to co-conspirators known and unknown?
Great question. I'm happy to answer. So if you look at who are the names, so that was the non-prosecution agreement that was finalized in terms of the wording of it in September of 2007. Epstein signs it. Sorry about the thumbs up thing. I don't know I never disabled that. Because I flail around and there's some Mac feature where it gives you a thumbs up bubble. But so in the September 2007, right, the text is finalized. Epstein signs it, but it's not implemented yet because it becomes effective upon Epstein's entry of a guilty plea. But they put into that non-prosecution agreement this immunity clause, right? So they name four individuals who are hereby, upon the effectuation of this non-prosecution agreement, immunized from any further federal prosecution having to do with Epstein's claims offenses. And they're four low-level female, basically employees of Epstein, who were alleged to have been potential co-conspirators because they used the phone and called a girl, or a girl called them, and they sort of facilitated the movement of some of these girls back and forth to the Palm Beach house. So Nadia Marcinkova, Sarah Kellen, Leslie Goff, Adriana Ross, no prominent people, not Bill Gates. And then they say, and then any other potential co-conspirators, but that's related to that discrete, localized case in terms of the Palm Beach situation where Jeffrey Epstein was essentially privately, having some of these Palm Beach girls. And this was definitely reckless behavior on his part, but even leaving that aside, that was in terms of his personal massages, which he was pathologically obsessed with getting constantly. It had nothing to do, like nobody involved at any level in the brokering of that non-prosecution agreement, whether we're talking about his defense counsel, whether they're talking about the prosecutors, the police, the FBI. Nobody, if you look at all the records, contemporaneous records, nobody had any conception that that would be later be interpreted to somehow immunize like a Bill Clinton or a Bill Gates or whomever. If anything, it was about the fact that by technical letter of the law, some of the girls themselves could, in theory, be charged with, quote, trafficking or with some related offense because they would be recruiting one another or they'd be facilitating one another's movements. Some of the girls actually said, we don't want to prosecute Jeffrey. We want to prosecute this other girl who they had a feud with or who they didn't like. So that was an immunization. That was intended as an immunization of any of the other girls who could have been charged theoretically as participants in Epstein's scheme, such as Haley Robson, who we're now told is a survivor, such as Tatum Miller, such as others. Okay, so that was the scope of it, and you would easily discover that if you went through the voluminous material on that Florida non-prosecution agreement and the investigation underlying it.
I'll respectfully disagree to the extent that, unless you disregard what Acosta said, is that he was told not to delve deeper because Epstein was intelligence.
See, this is another myth. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about this quote still. Seriously?
No, I can't.
I'll get into it, but
well, you get into it because I'm not sure that I can believe you're denying it, or at least
I'm denying the credibility of that quote 100%, which was foundational to the formation of this larger Epstein myth, in terms, especially on the internet.
Hold on. The credibility of the quote.
I'll explain it if you want,
or the having uttered the quote.
I'll explain if you like.
Go for it.
Okay. You know what the origin of that quote is? You know where it first appeared?
It was during a deposition of Acosta in 2019, where he mentioned that's what he said in 2008. Okay, so
that's 100% wrong. See, this is why there's such myth that.
Well, but me being wrong doesn't address the statement. So when
but you clearly never looked into the provenance of that quote.
But this is more ad hominem.
If that quote is like the linchpin of your theories on things, like why wouldn't you look into it at some point?
That's three ad hominems. What are you denying? The statement was made. Are you denying the statement was made?
I'll tell you. I asked you if you knew the origin of the quote. So it was not. The quote was not in deposition. It was in a single Daily Beast article by Vicky Ward, a former tabloid British journalist, in July of 2019, where she buries the lead. And you would think that if she had this explosive scoop that Trump's labor secretary admitted that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence, and that's why he backed off, that would be in the headline or something. No, it's buried. It's like the throwaway quote. She claims that this quote was something that was told to her 2 or 3 years before July of 2019 by a person whom she characterizes as a former senior Trump administration official, whom we now know with 99.9% certainty was Steve Bannon, who Vicky Ward had been collaborating with on a book having to do with the Kushners, and Jared Kushner was Bannon's chief rival during the first Trump administration. And if there's any consummate bullshit artist on the planet, it's Steve Bannon. And yeah, that's just being relayed by this former tabloid journalist, Vicky Ward, in this article. She never does any real follow-up on it. She never substantiates it at all. It just gets thrown in there and then recycled across the internet constantly, and nobody even knows what the genesis of it is.
Well, no, you're right.
It's quadruple hearsay. And Acosta, when he did do a deposition, or when he did have to do an interview with the DOJ on this and he was asked about this very issue, did you ever say that you had some knowledge that there? He's asked in a 2020 report from the Office of Professional Responsibility for the DOJ. So if you lie, if you lie to them, you're going to jail. Did you have any knowledge that Jeffrey Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence during this Florida non-prosecution agreement negotiating phase? He says the answer is no. He repeated it yet again when he did an interview with the House Oversight Committee in September of 2025. Mm-hmm. So no, this was never in a deposition. That's just another myth.
No, that was my mistake. It was what I was confused about was the deposition that Mike Benz suggested we would resolve that particular question, which occurred in 2019. And
Mike Benz is off the reservation too on this stuff. So unfortunately, I mean, I would love to find somebody who is like a self-proclaimed Epstein researcher who evinces some sign of having done legitimate research. And I can't find him. Whitney Webb, Daryl Cooper, Mike Benz, I haven't looked into in a great detail, although he was on, Piers Morgan with me and just sat there like a potted plant. You name it. Dave Smith, I guess he doesn't consider himself a researcher. He's just like a bloviating failed comedian. Nick Bryant, Tara Palmieri is more of like a journalist. I mean, but like none of these people do like actual. Julie K. Brown, supposedly our most intrepid investigative journalist of our time, because she going on what broke the Epstein story for the Miami Herald when she just got fed selective stuff by these profit-seeking lawyer cabals. But anyway, I digress. So no, like, this is important though, right? Because this is like a central tenet of this online mythology. Everybody just believes this quote and repeats it ad nauseum. I thought we had maybe gotten beyond it. I thought maybe people had figured out that it was BS. Like, Sagar Breaking Points, when this whole uproar began last summer, he just went around saying, "Yeah, I mean, Acosta must have said that." And he said it was congressional testimony. He went on Tucker's podcast and said it was congressional testimony. He didn't look into it either at that point. I don't know. Like, am I the only guy who like looks into stuff so I can see if stuff is actually
no
credible before like just spouting off about it?
Everybody will, nobody's going to be 100% on all facts, and it's true that
that's a false fact claim.
Well, first of all, I say disputed or denied by the time it comes around to it. And so the explanation then is that there was no broader reason to not prosecute or investigate further Jeffrey Epstein at the time. Yeah, don't worry. Wait, hold on, Mike. We're going to raid the next party over here. Do you have 15 more minutes or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll come over to locals and we're going to get the Q&A from there, but I do want to read one crumble rant from King of Biltong, which says, "This isn't just biltong. It's premium meat, real craftsmanship, clean ingredients, all made in-house, sold direct. Welcome to BiltongUSA.com. Use code VIVA for 10% off." We're going to take the party over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com, get a Q&A. Mike,
wait, so are we going to like a subscriber session or something?
This is a subscriber session only.
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit of a pain in the neck right now because
don't worry.
I don't know. I if I go on podcasts or streams and then all of a sudden they say, "Look, everybody, I'm paywalling this," or "We're going to,"
I won't paywall. I do an after show anyhow. So if you don't want to come, don't worry about it.
No. I would, but. Okay, I'll do it.
Hold on, forget about that.
I'll do 10 minutes.
Tell everybody now before we go over on Rumble where they can find you and how they can support your work.
If you're not already like so explosively aggravated with me that you're somehow wanting to further read my stuff or hear my stuff, mtracy.net. M Tracy on YouTube. I don't use that quite as much. I try to like do something novel, I would say, in the modern media ecosystem, which I try to stay grounded as much as I can in like the written word. So I like to write more than bloviate, although I accept these streams and podcast invitations constantly. So
Anton's meat is never full. I'm not going to read that. I want to give the link over on Rumble.
And then M Tracy on X.
mtracy.net, and I'll flip. Let me show what your mtracy.net or not .net. M Tracy on
Tracy with an E. Remember?
Yeah.
Irish spelling.
X. Irish, so that would have resolved one question that I'm sure the chat was asking.
I am unfortunately not Jewish. I would love it if I were. I would say my IQ would be a few points higher. Everybody assumes I'm Jewish, I guess, because of my mannerisms or maybe my appearance. And I always say, look, I get all the downsides of anti-Semitism.
I can't make jokes. I can't make jokes that might get me canceled. M Tracy on X, so everybody can go check you out there, and I'll give everybody the link. Okay, there we go. And we will keep it short. You don't have to stick around for 2 minutes. We'll just get that. And then I do an after show every time on local. So it's not a question of exploiting the guests. It's just a question of
I'm not gonna. I just have a call came in that I have to get to.
Okay,
so I'm not going to do the after. We'll do 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to remove from X. Goodbye, everybody. And I'm going to remove from Rumble and see you all later. And now, I forgot to raid. I'm going to go raid. All right, Mike. Let me just see some of the questions that are coming in here. Julian Assange says there's no dirt on Trump. What do you guys know? Says Onley. The war. Oh, I got that. That's about the war. Oh, let's do a little bit of the. So, what is your take on what's going on in Iran? I mean, not to get into it. It's the after stuff here. This is still on the internet, so don't say anything that you'll regret. I don't know if we're aligned on.
I say pretty much what I said on the internet. What I would say in private. Like, there's not a huge distinction in terms of like if I'm commenting on a political issue or something like that. Obviously, everybody has personal feeling that they don't necessarily just broadcast, but. Anyway,
so your impression it's not.
No, I think it's totally crazy. It's batshit. And like, okay, so here's my problem with it. One of my problems. Obviously, the main problem is just the cataclysm itself that Trump decided to ignite in the while everybody was sleeping, at least in the United States, with no debate, really, no public sort of consideration of the costs or the objectives because they're shifting constantly and they can't keep their story straight. Because everything this all flows just from Trump's like caprice or his whim, right? People want to say, oh, it's all Israel, like Israel dragged him into it. Come on. This is part of Trump's like second term ideology. He thinks he's on some kind of like global conquest crusade. He declared himself the ruler of Gaza. He declared himself the ruler of Venezuela. He's saying they're not going to be taking over Cuba. He wanted to seize Greenland. He wanted to seize Panama. He will probably come up with a couple other countries that he's looking to seize at some point. He wanted to seize the natural resources and physical infrastructure of Ukraine in that so-called minerals deal. So this is like part and parcel of that. This is the next phase of this blinkered crusade that Trump is on in his second term. And, I've been talking about this for a long time because I'm the only one who noticed that in his inaugural address, he was citing William McKinley, a little bit of an obscure reference, but that was a president in around 1900. And William McKinley is the president who Trump's speechwriters had him, at least who are channeling his instincts, right, for a speech, an inaugural address, who best reflects like the presidency that Trump wants to model his second term on. And Trump praised William McKinley's foreign policy, saying like he brought glory to America. William McKinley was the first president who sent overseas expeditionary U.S. forces on to foreign countries that most of the U.S. citizens had never heard of, conquering the Philippines and stuff. And so that's who Trump thought that he was going to be modeling himself on. And sure enough, that's what he's been doing over and over again over the course of this term. And Iran is maybe is definitely clearly the most audacious instantiation of this. But people say, oh, it's just about Israel, or Israel's like forced them to do it or tricked him. I mean, at what point is Trump responsible for his own behavior? At what point does he become like the primary agent of responsibility here? It's always somebody around him, or somebody's always like manipulating him. It's never just Trump himself. This is like Trump's actualization of what he wants to do. And so that bothers me. And meaning because these like social media is just obsessed with like constantly saying everything in Israel that ever happens. Not that I'm a fan of Israel per se, but it's just like a dumb analysis. And then second of all, 2024. Okay, that was the most effective yet just like brazenly duplicitous propaganda initiative that I've ever seen in my adult life. In terms, I've spent a lot. I've been following U.S. politics and covering it journalistically for a long time now. It was the most effective and duplicitous propaganda initiative effort that I've seen. Meaning the RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan, Elon Musk nexus, where they were they were telling all their their younger followers, basically social media types or anti-establishment types, that what we're going to do? We're going to join together as this Avengers squad, and we're going to defeat the deep state by sweeping Trump back into power. We're going to restore free speech, and we're going to, stop the wars or something. Meanwhile, Trump was going around in 2024 threatening to blow up the entire country of Iran because he was told, or he was led to, because he believed that they were trying to assassinate him. He was already publicly advocating in October of 2024 for Israel to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, which would necessarily be in conjunction with the United States. So all of this was so telegraphed. If you actually took off your propagandistic partisan cheerleading blinders, if you just stop for a moment dedicating your life to supporting one politician, which is what so much of the online media ecosystem is about, always and everywhere. It's just we always have to be supporting our, great leader, Donald J. Trump. And I'm somebody who's I was one of the first people against the Russiagate narrative. I've been against a lot of overwrought anti-Trump narratives. And yet there was a wild overcorrection where there was just this onslaught of total propaganda that now you have people saying, oh, we've been betrayed. He's bombing Iran. I'm sorry. If you voted for Trump, or if you have a media environment where you were led to believe, or you formed the impression that by voting for Trump, you were not voting for somebody who in his first term radically increased bellicosity with Iran, and in his second term was promising to radically increase that even further, yes, by way of military action, then you were just deceived. I mean, you're a casualty of this propaganda onslaught because it was all there.
You're not making the best argument for those who are online saying this is what I voted for, because now you're saying that they're effectively right.
This is what you voted for. Maybe you thought you were voting for something else, but then if that's the case, you got to go back and recalibrate how you're getting your information.
Let me read these. There might be a question here for you. Specifically on the Clintons and Bill, the only reason I knew of Epstein almost 20 years ago is because of reports of his island and what went on there. It's impossible that I learned of this at the time unless some truth existed. At least,
well, that's not true. That those reports were never about Bill Clinton going to the island. People conflated that.
No, well,
they were about Bill Clinton flying on the jet to the Clinton Foundation events, and then yes, Virginia Roberts Gouffre, like the just unbelievably prolific serial fabulist, like the chief Epstein accuser who's responsible for generating all this phony mythology. She claimed in her fictionalized memoir that she had to admit was fictionalized like years later, that all kinds of stuff happened that she made up, meaning that she saw Bill Clinton on the island.
The Clinton going to the island is one that we heard.
That's from Virginia Roberts Gouffre.
Yeah, and that one was
like the least credible source,
unproven, but he went to Africa. So yeah, it's fair enough. But people have the memories of this from way back. Mr. Tracey, I think I've heard you on an X Space with Ryan Dawson. How do you feel about his information, and do you think he'd be a good interview for Viva? Keep being you.
No, Ryan he wouldn't. I mean, that's another bizarre one. Like I've had online commenters saying, you got to read. I'll try to explain. You got to engage with Whitney Webb. This is what people were beseeching.
I've had Whitney on before.
So I said I did it, and like her stuff is just a giant disaster. I mean, One Nation Under Blackmail, literally the worst book I've ever attempted to read on any subject. And she's like all over the place in her podcasts and stuff. It's like it's like a claim a minute. I know I can speak fast and I have a lot of information, but like you actually do a forensic look at what she says, and like it just falls apart. But at least she has like some work somewhere that I can go look at. Ryan Dawson is just this guy who people say, oh yeah, dude, engage with Ryan Dawson. He's done all this great work. Like I keep asking, where's the work? I mean,
I just thought,
and it doesn't exist anywhere.
This is he
sells Epstein themed merchandise you can get a T-shirt, which I know Ian Carroll was wearing when I saw him in Washington D.C. at the Epstein survivors press conference, where like it defames like all these people as supposedly having been on Epstein's client list and therefore child sex predators. But beyond that, I don't know what this guy Ryan Dawson's work even is vis-a-vis Epstein. And I also know, at least he told me or suggested to me, and then he ghosted me when I asked for additional details, even though everybody's saying debate this guy, right? He's like, he'll kill you. That he like colluded with these like mentally ill women who were like the foremost mythologizing accusers or alleged survivors of Epstein, Maria Farmer and Virginia Roberts Gouffre. So he's sort of like almost involved in the propagation of all this phony myth. I mean, you could have him on and like ask him why he won't respond to Michael Tracey anymore.
We got Jean-Luc Brunel ran a modeling company who undeniably contracted underage women and groomed those who couldn't make the cut as escort for rich women. What is that called? Well, then
I don't know why you find that undeniable. Here's one thing that is undeniable about Jean-Luc Brunel. When the French authorities had pressure put on them by the U.S. to arrest Brunel after Epstein was federally re-indicted in 2019, the French authorities then did so. Brunel was arrested. He was put into custody in Paris for like several years. And then Virginia Roberts Gouffre by 2021 gets summoned to Paris by the prosecutors to do this colloquy thing. It's distinct to the French system. It wouldn't happen in the US, but it's where like she can be questioned by both the defense and the prosecutors in like a pre-trial phase. And she has to recant claims against him too. I mean, the amount of people that this woman made false claims about is stunning. It ended and it culminated with her making claims about her own husband. And then her father, who she accuses of pedophilia. So I mean, it's just like wild. So that is undeniable about Jean-Luc Brunel. You say it's undeniable that he like trafficked around underage girls. I don't know. Okay, show me where you know that to be undeniable.
He wasn't convicted, but even if he was, we'll get into that catch-22. My issue has to do with the DOJ, FBI continually altering Epstein file information from links and redacting information, etc. Unless you print it out, the information is gone. How can you make any conclusions unless the document gerrymandering?
You can find archives based on when they
not
when they first published them.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we didn't get back to it, but the issue about you're right.
If it were up to me, I would have worded that legislation, the Epstein Files Transparency Act by Khanna and Massey, as simply release the Epstein files. Instead, they larded it up with all these qualifiers and exceptions that are open to interpretation, and just created this whole fiasco. Right. Well, because they have to redact stuff for the quote unquote victims, and who knows who a victim is. Like they could just, according to the DOJ, this is what Trump should be criticized for, the Trump DOJ anyway, blanching people. The only criteria for them just presumptively treating somebody as a victim, if this alleged victim says that they want a file removed or redacted, they only have to self-declare. Like they don't even have to provide a shred of evidence of anything in terms of like the legitimacy of their claim victimization. And it's just taken at face value. I mean, this is what they've said in the legal filings in federal court. And so, yeah, but that's because of this exception that Massey and Khanna put in, because they were conferring with Bradley Edwards, who's this victim lawyer, in the drafting of the legislation. They inserted this language, and it's caused this whole fiasco. So, yeah, I'm in favor of. One of the ironies here is people think, oh, I'm an Epstein denier, or I'm trying to cover something up. No, I'm actually much more in favor of full transparency and disclosure than these people, because I would have just said, release the Epstein files. So we're not hung up on this like never-ending like doom loop of, oh, why was this file redacted or taken down? And it's like, it's never ending. But that's not what they did because of this misguided.
Well,
any alleged victim ever.
Joe,
by the way, are not children now. They're like at the youngest in their mid-30s.
Tracey seems to have concluded that other than genuine photographic or videographic evidence, there is no critical mass of circumstantial evidence that is worth additional investigation. Silver, it's not even worth there is no possibility. But my issue is there's no possibility. The destruction of evidence is what's stopping us. That's the problem.
Which evidence was destroyed?
Well, say what this SDNY FBI withheld that they didn't communicate to Bondi, and they got her sternly worded letter about sending Kash Patel in. I mean, there's no doubt they've had 20 years to destroy.
That was their after evidence review.
No, but either way, you got agencies withholding information, and you've had 20 years to destroy whatever needed to be destroyed, or at least conceal whatever needed to be concealed, and you never investigated.
We don't have any evidence that any evidence was destroyed.
That will destroyed or removed. We'll disagree. That might be tantamount to the same thing.
No, I'm asking you. I mean, do we have evidence that any evidence was destroyed?
Destroyed? No. Removed or in the custody of untrustworthy agencies? Yes. So
removed and then placed where?
Well, I don't. Well, once it's removed, I don't care what anybody says happens.
What do you mean removed?
That. Well, I mean, removed. We're going to go back and see what was removed from Epstein's. I forget which property before various raids, because it was twice now, before the initial raid and before the subsequent raid.
I think he got the timeline off with the New York raid in 2019. Palm Beach in 2005. Yeah, I mean, there is evidence. I think that some of the computer equipment was removed.
I might be mixing up the two, but I think it was both, but I'll double check that anyhow. It's that also is just going to add more arguments, not contradict any arguments. And let's bring this one up here. Ask Michael to
because in 2019, Epstein was not anticipating that he was going to be arrested when he was flying back from Paris to Teterboro Airport in Jersey. In 2005, he did know that there was an ongoing Palm Beach police investigation, so they preemptively his house could be searched. So they did, preemptively, remove some like what they consider to be personal, computer equipment. Doesn't mean that necessarily, because I wouldn't want somebody to take my computer either, even if I don't have any like child sex crime evidence on it. It's not necessarily.
But then it didn't happen. But if it did, there's a potentially innocuous. I think there is a critical mass of circumstantial evidence. But the pizza stuff, Michael.
Your position is that it doesn't matter if we never get any hard evidence of anything. We can still just.
I think we've got a ton of hard evidence. But you write off Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction. You write off Jean.
No, I don't write it off. I acknowledge she was convicted.
No, but
we haven't got to any of the specific evidence from that trial.
No, but I agree. Trafficking only to Epstein for his prurient interests. You disregard, or at least there's no concrete evidence of Jean-Luc Brunel, and he was only arrested from pressure from the U.S. And then he killed himself, so he can't tell any stories. I think Jean-Luc Brunel's sexual abuse is well documented, and
but not vis-a-vis Epstein.
The connection to Epstein is there as well. So then it's just a question of
but I'm saying there's no well-documented sexual abuse of children by Jean-Luc Brunel vis-a-vis Epstein. I know there was some we'd have to TV special on him in the 80s.
No, I would concede that as well. Yes. So then the question is, all right, well, so just two at least solicitation of prostitution from minor.
But like you realize if you concede that, then like the whole edifice of the sex trafficking theory kind of collapses. If he's supposed to be the prong of it.
Well, I know you disregard this particular. What do you make of all the pizza references here? I was going to pull up Podesta's email.
What I make of it is it's a perfect emblem of how polluted the information environment is on this stuff. Again, we had swarms of people thinking that the most prudent research methodology for them to understand what was notable in the Epstein file was to just start searching for various food items. But that's not an answer. Crazy.
That's not an answer. How do you make sense of we need to figure out how thinly to slice up one piece of pizza for 7 adults? I mean,
I think if you look
code.
at if you got millions of files, like, so I said to people, look, okay, I'm just going to on the fly right now think of some random words: kangaroo, saxophone, doormat, blah blah blah. I searched them all in the Epstein files, and they all yielded results. So if I'm looking at the kangaroo thing through the prism of
that's a bad
okay,
argument.
everything that is in this archive, we kind of presuppose must have the most sinister possible implications that we can then impute onto them because that's just our presupposition. Then yeah, I mean, of course you could do it.
So,
but
hold on.
Like
so
reverse reasoning.
And just to caveat this so that nobody accuses me of making a mistake, this I appreciate has not to do with Epstein. This is just the Pizzagate. So you're saying it's there, it's weird, but I don't know. But I'm not imputing the most negative possible interpretation to it. You remember this one from Podesta, right?
I mean, not off the top of my head.
I didn't. It was from.
I mean, like, people keep bringing up Pizzagate as like that's like the proper way for us to understand these materials. I'm sorry. Did it ever turn out that there were child sex slaves being held in the pizza shop in Washington D.C. or like was that phony? I seem to recall it being phony. Or do you know that there were child sex slaves actually?
I remember there being an argument.
Pizza restaurant.
I remember there being a debate as to whether or not there was in fact a basement to that place. But set that aside.
No, but child sex slaves.
Because
that was the claim, right?
By some, but not by all. But forget that one.
Why is it called Pizzagate?
Well, no, it's called Pizzagate because CP and pizza and common pizza.
People reading emails saying, "Oh, this means that there's this child sex
Michael,
operation running out of the pizza shop."
This is an email from the realtor to John Podesta, and it says the realtor. Sorry, this is who's it from?
So why are we going? Like, was there a child sex? Were there any child sex slaves associated with Pizzagate?
No, but you're not. Don't answer a question with a question. Just this question. The realtor found a handkerchief. I think it has a map that seems pizza related.
Oh, you're reading a random email to me from WikiLeaks that I mean, I don't know what it means. I'm
not trying to ambush you either, because these are the questions. When someone says we're 7 adults and we need to know how thin to slice the pizza, it's code.
I don't know. Like, unless I was addled by the constant presupposition that like everywhere there must be like pedos hiding behind every bush, ready to like abduct every child and then traffic them.
But maybe you'll say they're talking about drugs.
If I otherwise see an exchange that references pizza, my assumption, unless there's something that clearly signals to me otherwise, would be that it's just about pizza. Like people tend to enjoy pizza. It's like the most popular food on the planet, pretty much. I don't know. I mean, do you like pizza? I like pizza. I mean, maybe I've eaten too much of it over the years.
I don't like carbs and
right. I mean, but like it's tasty. People enjoy it. And like, I don't know, it's just so bizarre. Like if this is the stuff you have to cling to, you got to get with it because it's just so
well. No, it's well, anyway. Michael, we'll say our proper goodbyes after. This has been great. I'm going to end it on locals and we'll talk for a couple of seconds. You have to go, but thank you very much for doing this. It was good. And look, you've made a couple of decent points, and at the very least, elucidated some facts, and then some other stuff that I still have to go back and double check and see who's more accurate.
Okay,
but
please do. I mean, it's always possible I can make an error. I make a couple. No. I think what I say is like I am directionally right about everything that I say, but I can still screw up a fact or a detail or whatever. So when I do, I try to then correct it.
Well, you reprogram and then reassess. Stick around. We'll say our proper guys. Locals, get out of here. Have a good day. I'll see you in a bit. Godspeed and God bless everybody.